All right. Good day, everyone. Welcome to this podcast episode of The Single Source. Today, I'm here with Nicola and Chris discussing, well, not just product data, but product data governance. Today, it's all about how great product data actually starts with great product data governance. You've maybe seen some of the elements that impact your product data quality, from the actual data, the processes used, the people involved in the process, the tooling that you put on top. Usually don't start with the tooling, but start with all the other elements. But that all falls apart when you don't have a great governance structure in place, coordinating all those different elements. So we're going to dive into exactly that topic. And this is a live session, so you can comment on your right-hand side, and we'll try to weave in those comments. There will also, of course, be a recording made available and published on our podcast feed. So if you're not following us already, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You should be able to find The Single Source and leave a review. We'd love to hear from you there as well. Now, before we dive any deeper into the topic at hand, a quick round of introductions maybe, starting with Chris and then Nicola. Chris?
Yeah, hi. I'm Chris. I'm the co-founder of Pinventors together with Stefan. We are working on product data for 100% of the time. And I've done this more than 25 years already, starting in the e-commerce and all kind of related topics on product data, and helping a lot of companies with organizing their product data, not just the technical part, but also the organizational part. And that's what we are going to talk about today. So we're pleased to have Nicola in the room. So Nicola, please.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, my name is Nicola Askham. I'm known as the data governance coach, and I help organizations understand and manage their data better. I'm not quite as experienced as you, Chris. I have been doing data governance 24 years, though, and it's challenging, but I love it. And I love being invited on things like this, because anything to help people be more successful at data governance, because I'm biased, but I think it makes everything else more successful.
Awesome. So we already discussed, right? So you have different elements that are interacting when you're sort of implementing a PIM, or you're trying to improve your product data. But what we see with customers when you invest, let's say, a six-figure investment in the licensing and the deployment of a new solution, 6 months in, the product data already starts to falter. So I'm curious what you experience in practice with customers, with clients, and ways to prevent that investment from going to waste, basically.
Ooh, so yeah, and it's really sad, isn't it? People have realized that they need to manage this data better and manage their product data as a single source of the truth. And they put all this money into it. And then I get so frustrated. I haven't worked as like an interim data governance lead for many years, but when I was, I'd be going up to people saying, "Oh, you're doing master data management. Can I get involved?" And they'd kind of go, "No, back off. Nothing to do with you." And you go, "But it's everything to do with me. I'm helping you do data governance." And I've just seen time and time again, and I talk to people at conferences and events where people spend a lot of money on getting a shiny tool. They will spend a lot of money on their project team. They might even bring in, contract business analysts to help them. But instead of actually talking to the right stakeholders, the business analysts just go, "Oh, I think that's the same data." And they map it. And so, and I've actually worked with some really good business analysts who have actually got the right things mapped. So we do match and merge the right things. And so perhaps on day one of launch, the data is all shiny and correct, and it's clean and lovely. But then without the data governance processes in place, it all just deteriorates because nobody knows the importance of managing it and maintaining it, and people carry on their old bad practices. And I think it's quite rare that I see people actually get it right to begin with, and it's quite often not so good when they launch. And it's such a shame for something that's, I think data governance is a simple concept, but it's hard to do, which is slightly different. But I don't know. I don't know if your experience has been the same.
Yeah, exactly. Because uh, an individual doesn't oversee all the consequences from their actions, especially when you're a data steward and needs to put in data in a system. You just put in the data in the system, and you, oh, maybe I need another value in there. Okay, I'll put it in there, and but it has consequences all over the place. So you need someone really, not someone, but a group of people actually to organize this and
Mm.
really guide this, because once you put in the wrong data, it has consequences in the downstream. So it's not just this one item in your PIM solution or MDM solution. It has consequences in your ERP, in your logistic information, in all kind of information and processes. So things go wrong, and it's it's not needed. You, of course, always there are always things going wrong, but they, you can prevent a lot of those things, I think. Yeah.
I think I fully agree with that. It's sort of sad, really, because there has been so much momentum and investment in principle the right ingredients, right? But it's just putting the ingredients together doesn't make a cake. I think that is also what we see, and I think many people do not fully appreciate the complexity of baking a good data quality cake. um, and if you lack some of the ingredients, it's not just that it's not as nice as it could be. It is just a bad cake overall, and it. I mean, I'm not sure if you can tell people that it is actually very complex, that they maybe just have to stub their toe once or twice, or well, hopefully that's enough. Um, have you seen that in practice at customers or clients, that they have to make the mistake first, or are there examples of customers doing this first time right?
Ooh, oh gosh, as you were saying that, I'm thinking I can probably think of more things that have gone wrong the first time
Yeah.
than have gone right. Isn't that terrible? Um, yeah, I think you might be right there, Stefan, that it's that you have to have things go wrong. And I'm thinking back to one where we got involved to do a kind of emergency rush job on data governance because an attempt at PIM had failed spectacularly, and somebody on the project team was trying to do some research online to try and work out why that might be, and heard of this thing called data governance, which might be the magic wand. But I think he also thought that it was something we could just do in a week, and and of course it
And it's
wasn't.
done.
Data governance takes a long time, and that reminds me, there's I think it was for a webinar I did years ago. I was preparing for it, and I remembered, I'm sure you probably have a similar adage, but when's the best time to plant an oak tree, which is 200 years ago, and when's the next best time? Well, today. And I remember in that webinar on my slides, I got this big picture of an oak tree going, well, data governance is the same with PIM, with master data management of any kind. And, if you haven't already got it, then you need to get started, because it doesn't happen quickly. Not quite 200 years, but it does take a long time.
Well, not
I
200
should
years.
say it's,
Yeah.
it really falls apart already within 3 months when you don't do the things,
Yeah.
and that's the point. When you don't have the steer on things, uh, people just do their thing and they think they're doing the right things, but maybe they do, maybe they don't. Nobody knows,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
that's happening.
But just to maybe help people wrap their head around the complexity. So, Nicola, if you could walk us through sort of how you would define data governance, or situate it within that landscape of the data, the tool, the people, the processes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, because I think, unfortunately, data governance is the most misunderstood and perhaps misdefined online. And I used to say to people, if you Google data governance, well, then perhaps don't, because if you don't know which definitions are right and which are wrong. It's just going to confuse you. And now it's even worse because we've got AI that's going to help us, and they're going to look at everything and give you this really authoritative answer, which makes it sound very big and very complicated. So, for everybody listening to this, data governance is not GDPR, it's not data security, it's not access management. What it actually is it's the framework, I would say, for the decision making around data. So it very much fits in both the people and the processes that you're talking about. Of course, there are tools to help you do data governance, but actually you need to be doing data governance and the tool helps you. And it's a bit like PIM. You can't do PIM without a tool, but you can't buy a tool and expect it to do it for you. So data governance is really, really about the people and the processes you give them to follow. And so that involves making people responsible for data. So we have roles like data owner and data stewards, and then we make them follow processes. And when we're doing things like PIM, they are really key. If you're doing data governance generically, there might not be a lot to do on a day-to-day basis, but it should be our data owners that agree the rules for how we're matching and merging things to get the same things and we get the right lists of our products. And it should be the data stewards that are looking at, well, hang on a minute, it's like you got two products the same here. There's enough, which, and if we are merging, which fields are taking precedence, kind of thing. So we need our business stakeholders who understand that data to do that. And that's where data governance gives you those roles and responsibilities, that framework to get the right business stakeholders making the right decisions when it comes to PIM.
Yeah, but I think even defining a single data steward or data owner within the organization is already a huge leap for many organizations where it is still very much a siloed. Like if you look at many of our clients, it's different silos, right? So one silo is responsible for purchasing and the incoming product data. There are category managers that are responsible for the sort of technical specs and the deep down knowledge on the product and the category. And there's people that serve customers or are responsible for the different output platforms, be that e-commerce or be that the app or a catalog or even just the different sales managers. So defining this process owner, basically, or a data owner that covers all of these different silos, that's I think the first, well, maybe not the first, but at least one of the most important steps within each organization, and that there should be someone responsible across the whole process instead of just per domain or per step in the process.
Yeah, and it's really hard. And I was having a very interesting conversation with a client last week about this. Can we use process owners instead of data owners? And I think if you are in a very simple company that has, the data, each data set or data domain is only used in one process, you could probably do that. If you're in a company that is thinking about doing PIM, you're probably not that simple because you wouldn't need PIM in the first place. So I'm not a fan of process owners being the data owners. Unless that data is only used in one process, then they may well be the same person. But I do think you need one person to be the data owner. And this gets really hard with product data because, it depends on what you do. But one of my big clients at the moment is a big retailer. And they have got so many thousands of products that they sell. And so I can't have one data owner that says I own all product data because they're going, well, I don't understand it all. But we can't have one for each product because, again, that's stupid. So you've got to be looking at perhaps product classifications, and you've got to find a way of making it manageable. And that in itself, as you say, I think it's an important first step, but it's not easy.
Yeah, no, but you're right. Sorry, Chris, go ahead. Yeah.
I think what you just described, Nicola, that's what we see as well. And then it's not just one. Well, there needs to be one responsible for things and coordinate the product data. And of course, you cannot when you have 30 categories have one product owner or data owner. That's impossible. But there needs to be one responsible for this. So you have to organize this in a way that it escalates within the organization towards one person.
And I think it gets really hard as well. If you work in I'm trying to think, but I can't think of a single retailer in the UK, unless you're really small and specialist, you sell products in more than one category.
Yeah.
And so therefore, in an ideal world, if it was something like client customer data, you'd have one data owner that says, this is the data we need to capture about customers, this is how we need to hold it, this is the rules around it. But when we get to product data, we could agree it with Stefan, and Stefan goes, this is it, I am the product data owner, and these are the fields I want held. And then Chris goes, hang on a minute, I'm selling some really technical products here, and I need to also have these fields. And Stefan's going, nope, I'm the product data owner, and you can't do that. And we can't, that's crazy. We can't allow that to happen. So we end up with really, perhaps it's a challenge, but we can do it. But we have to very carefully define our roles and responsibilities to allow for that.
Yeah, but that's the hard bit, right? So coordinating that across the whole organization, across different geographies or different silos, different steps of the process, or even as you said, like I think many people underestimate that complexity even within the organization when it comes to that retailer, which has, let's say, 50,000 SKUs or maybe 200,000 SKUs, which is not unusual, especially when it's a broader sort of category mix that they sell. You have 40 attributes per SKU, maybe 20 to 50 different categories. That's a lot of complexity that you're actually managing there, and yeah, making sure you keep your data model up to date, that you don't have these discussions, or that you have a way to resolve the discussions between me and Chris in this case. That's, I think, one of the most important things. That's one of the most important components of data governance.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe what do you see going wrong then in those tooling implementation steps, right? So when we get involved, usually it used to be during selection of those PIM solutions and DM solutions only, or maybe just to confirm a hunch that they already had, like we actually want to implement tool A, but let's check in with these guys from pimvendors.com and make sure that we actually made the right choice or have a defensible choice against the board. We're now much more involved in that preparatory process where, like, okay, where is our organization on a data maturity scale? Basically, how does our process look? How does our tooling look? How does our data governance look? And where should we move towards? What we still see is that people cling on to the more concrete elements, like, okay, the tooling and the steps in that tooling, the process that a product has to, the product lifecycle maybe, but then forget that they actually have to define different roles and responsibilities and organizational structures. Yeah.
So I think, I've seen. Oh, I probably got like 3 categories of mistakes, I suppose, that I've seen people make over the years. I think there's and it's much more your area because I'm a people person, not a technical person, but people choosing the wrong tool based, because as you know, there's so many different architecture ways of doing master data management, and they choose a tool that's not really best suited for their current systems landscape and architecture. So and that in itself causes problems. And then I think the other more technical one is where I've seen where IT chooses the tool and implements the tool as almost like a technology upgrade or a refresh. The old systems no longer support it, so we'll do a new one. And it's being led by a technology team and not really engaging the business, which is kind of my third one anyway, which is, it's if you don't have the data governance, you haven't got the right stakeholders involved. And then we're down to, well, I asked Chris because he's a nice chap. He always smiles whenever I talk to him. But Chris is really busy and he's just saying yes. And then we find out later that actually he wasn't the right person to be talking about some of this data, and we've done something that was wrong. Or we know, and we don't find about those nuances between the different product categories. And and I find that, there's it's, to be fair, it's probably any data project, which is any project that involves data, it's the same. We don't get the right business stakeholders involved. And if we haven't got the data governance framework in place, even if Chris is the right person, if we haven't told him he's a data owner and he's allowed to make these decisions, what I've seen an awful lot is that Chris will go, that sounds really sensible to me, but I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that. So and so decisions don't get made, or a project manager just goes, oh, let's just go with it. And we don't get the right things being done because we haven't got clear roles and responsibilities and processes for, you say, either making decisions, or if you're not sure, because it's got such a widespread use in a complex organization, we need forums and routes to escalate and share for everybody to say, yes, you are the owner, Chris, but thanks for asking me. There's just one little tweak I need because you've forgotten my special code that I have for my product.
And it's not just about implementing a hierarchy or something like that, because that's what we've got asked. Oh, we should make an hierarchy. Well, we should talk to the stakeholders and see what they're up to, what capabilities do they have, what wishes do they have from within the organization, what's needed, and it's not just a paper thing.
Definitely not.
But it is. I think many people underappreciate this aspect, right? So the fact that this is so complex and can take so much time to do the alignment right, but it is such a waste if you don't, because we already mentioned it. You can have the perfect tool and cleanse all your data perfectly during an implementation process or data cleansing process, and define the perfect and smoothest, no bottleneck process from onboarding all the way to publication, and align everything with great AI integration so that products don't spend any time at all in the enrichment step. You don't have to wait for the copywriter. You don't have to wait for the German translation. It all rolls smoothly all the way down to your web shop. But if you then don't maintain that process and maintain that the governance structure in 3 months or 6 months, it starts to deteriorate. The data quality starts to deteriorate because, I don't know, your can be a varying number of reasons, like the suppliers change, or you add a new supplier who has not as strict data quality rules, or there's something going wrong with the AI integration, or there's the team changes also.
It's really true. You reminded me. I haven't done it for a little while. A basic data management course training. What is it? Kind of what's it? And I've got an analogy in there, which is exactly what you were just saying, Stefan. Is I have a picture of the human body in the middle of the slide, and on the left are all the fruits, the vegetables, all the things we know we should be eating a lot of, and on the right there's sweets, candies, all these the horrible sodas, sweet sugary drinks. And we know because governments and other people are telling us what we need to put in our bodies. But if we don't know, if perhaps we're not that well educated, we don't know, we eat all the rubbish stuff, and over time we become unwell and ill and sluggish. We get brain fog and we make the right decision, or the wrong decisions rather. And so that's exactly like we do with our PIM solution. Is like a human body. We can feed it rubbish data and it will go wrong. It's not it's not got anything magic in there. It might have AI to help us with our our enrichment and our product descriptions. We can honestly, the speed at which you can get products now, compared to what they were, kind of thing, is amazing to actually be able to sell products. But if we give it wrong data, even the AI can't make it right. So these tools are not magic. We have to feed them the good, healthy data.
I think one of the things you mentioned as well is sort of the finger pointing. Like, is it the fault of the individual that he or she eats only junk food, or should we not have junk food in and around each sort of area where people are waiting? Like, should you have a McDonald's on the train station? Maybe that doesn't make sense, or should you have them in schools? Like maybe we should have some like the system might be broken instead of the individuals, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, I've worked with so many clients over the years who will say, everybody's idiots in this company. They go around doing the data wrong. We need to go and beat them all up. And I normally start by going, well, there's no point having a witch hunt. I'm personally, I know I'm ever the optimist, but I think the vast majority of people don't go to work to do a deliberately bad job. We all want to go and do a good job, but sometimes nobody has done that education. So we're all a lot more aware now that perhaps we should have a basket of fruit, on the kitchen and in our offices, and not the big jar of biscuits or cookies. But so people are making changes like that, but nobody's gone and told them that they need to do that same switch for their data and need to think about their data and manage it as an asset. And it's not just that necessary evil thing that makes doing your job harder.
Yeah.
We need to kind of educate people. So I'm not a fan of that finger pointing and going, it's your fault, Stefan. You put the data in wrong. I'm much more inclined to go, Stefan, has anybody ever told you about, data being an asset and why it's important to capture this? Because I love, there's always these stories. It's always late at night or somebody's really rushed, as you say, and you go to enter something in the system, and then suddenly the drop down menu has 30 codes and you really can't be bothered to try and work out which product this fits in.
I want to close a new customer. I want to add this category. Yes, do everything. Or just fill in dummy data. I don't care. Like, I want to close this deal. They don't care about this, so whatever.
We have to teach them and have to explain that, because mostly people are just, you should say, doing what they're incentivized to do. Get a new deal, get a new customer, get a new product line. And they're not saying, hang on a minute, is the data good enough? Am I just selecting anything to get it done quickly?
But also allow for some flexibility, because sometimes you just need to have dummy data in and get this product through. If you don't allow for some flexibility, you suddenly have people using spreadsheets again, or selling products that are just outside the normal approval process because the tooling doesn't support them.
Being pragmatic is absolutely vital. And it wasn't product data, but I can remember years ago I was working for a big corporate insurer, so not car and house. They were doing the massive specialist insurance, and they were having a real trouble with broker data because there's rather a lot of brokers, but each underwriting team would enter their own version of the broker and spell it however they liked. Some abbreviated, some didn't, and they were and as an insurance company, you've got to assess your risk, and we couldn't, because we couldn't understand whether these were the same broker or not. And they, just before I got there, had implemented this very draconian system that will put Chris in charge of broker codes, and you cannot get a new broker put on the system unless Chris puts it in. And then Chris goes on holiday for 2 weeks. And then people are pulling their hair out because underwriters can't put really significantly large deals through, and they're going to lose out because somebody's going, are you going to write this deal or not? We'll go elsewhere if you can't. And it was getting, I had to, we're going to have to be a bit pragmatic. And we agreed almost like a dummy code that you could use to get deals written. And then when Chris comes back from holiday, he can double check with you and make sure it's allocated to the right broker, because it was almost like they'd gone from like no governance at all to being totally draconian, and it was losing them business. So we've got to be very practical, and clearly I'd love all data governance to be proactive and we get it right first, but we have to think of business implications and and just make sure we've got the processes in place retrospectively to correct things where we have to allow dummy data.
So true. Finding that balance and even being aware that there is, because obviously like the first reaction to this is, okay, we need to lock it down. We don't want people to make these things or find any exceptions, but you can be damn sure that people will find exceptions to every rule you try to force them in, and be that through political means or just using different tools or exceptions or whatever, they'll find a way. So you just need to be pragmatic, is a good word for this, but flexible in that process design, so that it serves these cases as well. Like, yes, there is a happy flow where everyone has enough time to do all the enrichment and all the AI validation and all, follows the normal process. That's perfectly fine. But there's always this rush job at the end of the quarter or whatever it is, and it needs to allow the process, and the data governance structure needs to allow for that as well. Like, otherwise you just end up with lots of exceptions. That's maybe also a good signal. Like, what are the signals that you're looking for, and the signals that identify a shoddy data governance structure? I think one of those is a lot of exceptions, or like if there's lots of exceptions, then probably something could be improved in the process or the data governance. What are the others that you're looking for?
And I think sometimes I think you've got to be looking at what you're measuring around the data, because sometimes KPIs can hide things. If that makes sense, if you're measuring the wrong thing. And I think there is that. And it's not just measuring the wrong thing, but also incentivizing people on the wrong thing. So during COVID, I was working with a medical equipment manufacturer in the US. And because CPAP machines were in huge demand with COVID, they were selling loads of them. And they had an SLA to get things to the customers that they ordered. So clearly their customers were hospitals, within so many days. And even with all of that extra pressure and the extra production line, they were getting that SLA nearly all the time. And the data governance manager that I was working with, when it just didn't, he knew, and he felt it was, something was wrong, and he did some digging, and he found out that they were meeting it, but their data on the product parts, to put the components to put together to make this product, was so poor that they were frequently running out of things, and then putting emergency orders that cost more money. And then instead of being able to book the logistics a week in advance, they were literally doing the equivalent like of a FedEx overnight, costing them like 4 or 5 times the shipping cost that it should have done if they did.
Yeah.
So on one measure, they're great, and they're meeting it even in the midst of this, crisis and huge volumes of delivery. But then he looked at something else, and nobody was looking at the costs of achieving that. So I think it's that people measuring the wrong things and saying, look, our shiny new system is great, look at what we're achieving, but they've measured the wrong things, and they've not really worked out what actually is valuable to measure.
Yeah, lots of new products offered on our web shop, but just with shoddy AI descriptions, and nobody's ever going to buy them. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So KPIs can hide things. Chris, any signals that you are looking for when talking to customers, or that you notice when talking to customers who have a data governance problem?
Yeah, it's again the silos you see, and we are responsible for our ecom data, so we manage this in our ecom environment, and it's totally disconnected then from the rest of the organization, resulting in bad data, and resulting in descriptions which doesn't match the product data you find in the store, for instance. And then people or customers, they get confused, and they're not going to buy things, or they buy the wrong things because the description is not right. And that's also something, where do I organize my data, and who is in the end responsible for this data? And
It's true.
also the moment, when do you enrich your data in the process? Because when a new product enters the organization, it's important that you can order things, so it needs to be in the ERP environment. It doesn't have to be the complete enrichment at that moment. So when the process is not right, the people waiting for the complete enrichment for a product when it's not needed. I mean, that's also something in the process and in the organization which needs to be fixed. These kind of things we see quite often, to be honest.
I've been on the receiving end of that. I tried to order a lamp online twice, and I kept getting the wrong lamp, not the one that was on the picture on the website. And the trouble
Yeah.
is, you end up, because I mean, we see the world through data glasses, and we can't help it. But I'm on, and it's actually a really well respected retailer in this country, and I'm on the phone to customer services, and they are one of the best customer service, and going, but you've got a data problem. Oh no, somebody's just made a mistake, we'll send the lamp out again. No, please don't send it the third time. You've got the wrong code somewhere in the system. What's showing on your website is not the code that's on the box of the lamp I
Yeah,
want.
but then you call customer service, and they have no clue about the whole thing. They're just seeing the things you see, so they think it's right and it's wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. And I use a delivery shopping service in the UK, and again, they've got fabulous customer service. But I literally had something last year where I said, honestly, they solve everything. They're brilliant, and I said to them, look, I think you've got a data problem. I'm quite happy. I work in data. I'm quite happy to talk to your data team if you like. And this lady went, oh, I don't think we have a data team. And I went, no, you really, really have a data team. You're an online grocery shop. You have no physical stores. You run on data. You might not realize it, but you do.
Yeah, but it is a relatively new sort of discipline, right? The data responsible. So I mean, maybe that was true. Maybe she just wasn't aware. But having someone having that role defined and having someone that is responsible for that process, for the data quality, for the different KPIs, even though they might hide some things, to resolve conflict, to make decisions like, okay, we're following this data standard versus that data standard, defining what the data quality is per stage gate, right? As Chris mentioned, you don't need all the rich information to add a product to the ERP. So you can already start ordering it and getting it into the warehouse before publishing it on the web shop. So having someone responsible for that domain, I would say, is definitely a new-ish thing, and hugely underappreciated, I think, because it comes sort of from this, oh yeah, it's somewhere over there, and it is seen as a cost line item, where actually, as you already mentioned, Nikolai, like if you do this right, you would have less returns and less costs for your customer service. So I think sort of the benefits, and that's maybe a problem that data always had, or that bad quality product data always had, is that the costs of bad product quality are always so diffuse, right? It's more customer service hours, it's higher shipping costs because of the returns, it's higher return rates, it's lower conversion on the website, but it's very difficult to tie that all back to
Yeah,
a
you can't
data
add it up
quality issue.
together and say this is the cost in one go, can you? So I think the one I was telling you about, who we did emergency data governance for years and years ago, they'd had an instance where, again, it was a wrong code, but they'd had 3 sofas delivered to a store, but they wouldn't fit in their warehouse because sofas were not supposed to be delivered and held in the warehouse, and they were left on the loading bay, and it rained before they could get collected, and they were ruined. And that was just one instance in one store that we found very quickly. And you suddenly go, but what about all they cost the cost of the actual product, but the transporting it, and then it had to be picked up and disposed of, and kind of how many
yeah, but
hours of how many employees were wasted while they tried to sort out why there were 3 sofas sitting on the loading bay of this store.
Yeah, but it does
no,
hide somewhere in the P&L, right? It's not a line item that
No,
says data
and I think
quality
that's the
issues.
trouble. And our senior people don't see it because it's not aligned. That would make our life so much
yeah,
easier.
yeah, we've been calculating what an error costs on a product. On
Mm.
average, it costs to make it better. It costs about 500 euros per error. It's not just this one item in
Mm.
your MDM or PIM, but it's what's going on in your organization as a result of this.
That's true, and it'd be interesting to see if your two's experience match mine. But I'm never. I do think you need a central team to support data governance, But I get really upset when people go, we've got a master data team and they do things. Because actually, in my experience, master data teams just do manual data cleansing, and they're making it better. I'm not sure they're making it right, because they're not the people using that data. They're not the product managers. They're not making the decisions. They're just going, oh, that's an exception. I'll bet to fix it somehow. So it is. So I'll just change that from code A to code B, because code B is allowed for that product. We don't know whether that's the right code for it, though. We just know it's an allowed one that won't break the database.
Yeah, it's the master data team, and actually it's a data entry team.
Yeah.
That's what's happening quite a lot.
Yeah, but they don't have process power or any power to redesign systems or the process. So they're just the fixers on the end of the operational pipeline, right? So yeah, I that sometimes when like we're discussing, like, do they have these roles defined, and then you're happy that they have at least some sort of master data team or some centralized function that is responsible for product data or master data or any data, but it's just the fixers, right? The guys that they fly in to fix data, or that are responsible on a day-to-day basis, without the actual power to change the process or discuss how to resolve any issues. So it's definitely better than having no team responsible, right? Having those data responsibilities just live within the different silos, right? So that also has its drawbacks. You have the web shop enriching products that they're also enriching in the German country team, that they're also enriching maybe in the catalog team, but they're all enriched differently. So you don't have a consistent brand experience across all your channels and all your geographies. That's a problem. That's inefficient, and it's inconsistent. Also not great. So then a central data governance team or central data team already helps, maybe, but usually they're not able to force or enforce a product solution or a process solution to fix that inconsistency or fix that.
Maybe the question is also, when you look at companies, let's say from 10 years ago, you had a category manager, and he was responsible for the products being purchased and sold within the company. But the capabilities of a category manager now are different than the capabilities of a category manager 10 years ago, because they need much more have the knowledge of the product, and also be involved in the quality of the data, because a product is not just a product, it's the product plus the data. And I think that has changed a lot. And I think the mindset of people haven't changed that much. They should.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think that our master data teams can be great allies when you want to do data governance. And I'm thinking back to one customer in particular. I was brought in by a different part of the organization to help them do data governance. I found out they were doing master data for the first time. Well, they would do it. One part of the organization thought they were doing master data team, but whilst doing talking to people, I got pointed towards the master data team, and I go, "Hey, minute, you're doing MDM for the first time, and yet you've got master data team." So they were doing their own fudged manual thing, and they were going to buy a tool for the first time. And it was only by working with them, and I ended up saying that we clearly need data governance framework. We need somebody to support data governance, and the head of the master data team said, I would love to do that. We would love to do that. Our team are so frustrated that this keeps going wrong. As you say, we're constantly entering data. We're constantly fixing data. We would love to support the data governance team. And they ended up with the master data team morphing into the data governance team. And as they almost like remove some of their manual overhead, they were able to be more proactive. And it was really lovely. Watching them step up and say, we're frustrated with what we've been doing. We know this can be done better. And we like the sound of this data governance thing. And they just embraced it.
Yeah. And I think it's good to find these people when there's a master data management team. It's usually concentrated there, but someone is fixing your product data or your data somewhere in your organization, being frustrated. If you can help surface these people and empower the data governance team to design new processes and get the experience and expertise in how do these processes work and how do they break within your organization, and fix them together with that team. I think that's great. You have the execution power and the capabilities combined. What I wanted to discuss before we close off is maybe the regulatory changes impacting product data and product data quality, right? And I think we see the digital product passport, PPWR, packaging regulation, all these decisions. I mean, maybe more so here on the continent, Nicola, but anyway, the European regulation hitting the manufacturers and the retailers here. What kind of an effect does that have in the product data quality and the product data governance
Well,
discussion?
I think it's really interesting because I was having a conversation with my retailer client earlier in the year where we were rolling out data governance in a new part of the organization that hadn't had it before. And we were doing the normal, why it's really important and why you should sign up and come and play with us kind of thing. And this guy went, oh God, we so need this. And he was on the end of the regulation side of things. And the country of origin has to be recorded correctly, doesn't it? And they had a problem where a whole shipment of products were confiscated in Thailand because the wrong country of origin had been put on the products. And so they lost the shipment, they were confiscated, and they were fined a considerable amount for no reason other than a data error. And this guy was just going, this is amazing. We need this. But I think from my experience in like the financial services, which have been heavily regulated for years, I don't like using regulation as a reason to do data governance, because then you get people to say, well, which of the product fields are regulated, and let's put all our effort into them, and we lose the bigger value. So I like to try and say data governance is hugely valuable. It will make your PIM so much more valuable, and therefore you'll be able to sell more products, you'll do better customer service, you'll get less returns, all those kind of things. And then you go, oh, and by the way, the cherry on the top of the cake is that you'll also meet all your regulatory requirements because we'll have done it correctly, rather than say, we've got to do this, it's regulatory. And I found that works a lot better. And there's always going to be some companies and some people within a company that won't talk to you unless you wave the regulatory stick. So, but I'd rather do data governance as a basic foundation that enables everything else then, and including the regulatory requirement.
Yeah, that's interesting. So instead of using regulatory pressure as a stick, maybe putting data management under the risk department instead of the IT department or the category management department, you'd rather keep it closer to the expertise, right? So whether that is the domain experts, right? So that could be the category management. Yeah.
And you say you need to talk to the risk people and liaise with them, because they're the ones that are going to get into trouble, them and the compliance team, for not meeting regulation.
Yeah.
But it's that, and I definitely see, I think as data governance, we're facilitators. We make sure the right people are being connected and involved. And I often see data risk as being part of data governance. But I met a lady at an event last week who is head of data risk for the London Stock Exchange. And they have a whole data risk team because their business is data, and they felt that they needed to split it out. And I was talking to her, and she was fascinating. But I do think taking that risk approach, or getting the risk people involved, can be actually quite valuable in getting people to understand that we have to do this. But the data governance people can still be the ones that are saying, but we're the good guys, we're helping you get all this extra value. And the risk and compliance teams are saying, and by the way, you have to do this, but Nicola's helping you achieve that, so we'll win, kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, in a way, it could be an interesting KPI that does work, right? So regulatory compliance as a KPI that can be used or be empowered by the risk management team to get the right resources for the data quality teams. But I also agree that the actual operation, or the actual operationally responsible team, should be tied to the product team, or at least closer to the fire, and not in the more regulatory risk environments.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Chris? Like, should we use compliance as a stick?
It's the same. It's the same with the digital product passport.
Hmm.
It's also a regulation, but you have already most of the data, and it gives you a competitive advantage when you organize this well. So the same what Nicola just said, you have fewer returns, all these kind of things, because your data is more healthy, it's more up to date, and this will help you in the long run. And then, of course, the compliancy, it can be a stake, it can be a way to also to move management to say, okay, yes, we need to do this instead. But that's the only thing I think which can help on in this side. Yeah.
Interesting. I think, yeah, in a way, I think we should, or at least it's an interesting approach for people that are stuck improving the data quality within their organization. I do think the regulatory pressures are an interesting escape. Maybe like AI is an interesting escape as well, right? And we've been managing to talk about product data and product data quality full 50 minutes without actually discussing AI in depth, but I'm gonna force it in because anyway, it is, I would say, the lever to get the data quality on a great level without hurting the sort of, without making the investment too big, right? There's I think a whole separate episode we can do about how to involve AI into data quality and data governance structure without making the mess even bigger. So maybe we should reserve that discussion for a later time. But there is a key here, right? Like regulatory compliance is a key to making this more important. I think the AI development that we're seeing and the return to high quality product data, because, or data in general, because otherwise it is just not found by these new channels, the large language models. There is definitely that is definitely a trend you can use internally to make this a higher point, this point higher on the agenda of the management team. Maybe before we close off, Nicola, like, what would you say if someone comes to you today or tomorrow and says, hey, I think my organization is struggling with some data governance issues, like where should they start tomorrow, or where they should have planted the oak tree 200 years ago,
but then now they're going to start.
What should they plant an oak tree tomorrow, or what should they do?
I think they need to make a start, but I think it comes, but it's kind of continuing on what we've been talking about. There is the regulatory drivers, and AI is definitely a driver for data governance. But I think before you go talking to people, you've got to work out, why does your organization need data governance? Because I've learned it the hard way in the first few years of my career is nobody wants to do data governance. They still don't want to do data governance. Demand for it is higher than ever before. But it's not because they want to do data governance. They want to do something else that data governance is going to enable. And, yes, it may well be AI, as you said. And it might well be that we say, but we don't understand our data. And if we let our large language models train on this data and we don't know what it is, we're probably not going to get the results that we expect. So it could be that that's your driver. It could be that you've got, perhaps a rising number of complaints. I had one client once who, a supplier, but basically gave a retailer an ultimatum and said, your data is so rubbish that you give us back, that it takes us so much effort to work out what you've sold, what's going on, that we give you 6 months to sort yourselves out. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. So I think it's because if we just go around saying, oh, I listened to this podcast and Stefan and Chris and Nicola are telling me that I needed to do data governance, everybody in the organization is going to go, so we're not doing this for best practice, and we're not doing it because we said so. You've got to work out what are the real business problems that your company has that doing data governance will solve, and you've got to talk about that, because people want their problems solved. They want the shiny things like AI. So we've got to talk in terms of what they are interested in. And if you can't get that story straight to begin with, you're never going to convince people to do data governance. You can use as much energy and passion as you like, and I really did, and it still really doesn't win people over. I've got to say, Stefan, I hear you've got a problem with such and such data, or I hear you've got a failed PIM implementation, and it may be because of the data. I think data governance could really help you overcome that. And now you're suddenly going, oh, instead of this woman bugging me about something else when I've got this catastrophe I'm trying to solve, he goes, oh, she's offering to help me. It's a different story.
Yeah. Chris, where do you think we should start, or where people should start tomorrow?
As always, start small, and don't try to solve everything in one go. But start small, and when you acknowledge the issue, address it, and try to get it on the agenda, and start small.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say, like, if you're now considering investment in a tooling, whether that is on the MDM side of things or more on the PIM side or the DAM side of things, I'm not sure if that's going to solve your data problems. Maybe take 2 steps backwards and look at the process and the governance, the data itself, before committing to a tooling. So definitely take some time before diving in. And thanks for sticking with us today. Maybe, Nicola, where can people find you if they have more questions about data governance?
Definitely. They can find me on LinkedIn, or I have my website is not very originally named, just nicolarascom.com. And I've also recently published a book on data governance if people want to kind of find out more about it.
Cool stuff. Well, if they want more information on PIM, they can look at pimvendors.com. We also have lots of knowledge-based articles and interesting webinars with solutions and thought leaders in the space. And of course, subscribe to this podcast so you stay up to date on all the developments in the PIM and product data space. That is going to include AI. So I think, Nicola, we'll have you back to discuss the impacts of AI on product data governance. But until that time, thanks a lot for joining us today and sharing your insights. And thanks a lot to the audience for joining us and sticking with us. See you all in another episode. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.